part 2 today. We've got Charlie Vascellaro. He's a frequent speaker on the academic baseball conference circuit and is the author of a biography of Hall of Fame slugger Hank Aaron. His writing has appeared in the Village Voice, the Washington Post, the Sun, LA Times, the Tribune, and the Arizona Republic, on MLB.com, on ESPN, La Vida Baseball, and Arizona State University's Global Sport Matters. He moved to Baltimore from Fountain Hills, Arizona, 24 years ago after attending Babe Ruth's birthday party and because of an old Billy Werber motto baseball glove that he found in the trash way back in 1983. So he has a presentation for us today, and we'll have some slides that go along with it. Charlie?
Thanks, everybody.
Here we go. Thank you, everyone. And in case anybody was wondering, this is a hot dog in my pocket, but I am happy to see everybody. This is, I love this time of year when everybody comes out of the hibernation season. February always kind of really marks the beginning of the baseball season, and for me, that always is triggered by Babe Ruth's birthday on February 6th. When that comes along, I start thinking, oh boy, now we're getting close. And Hank Aaron's birthday being the day before, those 2 days always kind of hit me and get me waking up and thinking about baseball again. And also, it's great to be in this room. And thanks to Dick, who already was thanked before, but I love this as a venue for this event. And you can see the mural on the wall here by Arve Adams, who's a great artist here in town. He's got a shop in Fells Point, and I think yesterday I was walking by, I was going to the Belgian Beer Festival at Max's, and as I'm walking by, Arve yells out and says hello to me. And I thought that was kind of prophetic, because as soon as he waved at me and said hello, I knew that today I was going to be here looking at his stuff, and I just thought that was kind of a foreshadowing last night. So this is an old story, but it's a good one. It's about the best job I ever had in baseball or in life. About 22 years ago or 23 years ago, I worked for the Babe Ruth Museum, taking the traveling exhibit around the country. And I can try and explain how fun that is, but I don't know if you can imagine how much fun that was. I was on the road for 2 whole baseball seasons, 6 months at a time, just taking the Babe Ruth Museum's exhibit to minor league ballparks from coast to coast. Here is the first slide, and it's a slideshow presentation. Here I am, ready to embark from Baltimore in the beginning of the baseball season in the year 2001. Feel free to move on to the next. Like I said, this was a great job. Just so much fun, and there's something I love about being in ballparks, and it's not always about the baseball. Sometimes it's about other things, and a couple of them on display there, the beer and the girls and all the fun. This is in Memphis, so that was our first stop on the tour, and what a neat ballpark that is, AutoZone Park. And at this time in the early 2000s, I think there really was a ballpark renaissance going on, especially in the minor leagues. I had no idea what I was going to run into in my travels. I had no idea how many neat ballparks I was going to see, and some of the old ones too. But this was kind of a state-of-the-art new one at the time. I think it had opened about 2 or 3 years before. Albert Pujols was a minor leaguer in Memphis on his way to becoming a Cardinal. Here we are on the concourse. So this gives you kind of an idea of what the exhibit looked like. You could set it up anywhere. You could set it up in this room. It was like putting a big erector set together. It took about an hour to put up. And in 2001, I was traveling by myself. In 2002, I had somebody who helped me put the exhibit together. But when I would show up at the ballpark in 2001, they would just give me one of the interns or somebody who worked at the ballpark and say, hey, help this guy put this thing together, because it did require 2 people to hold the pieces. Most of it was done with an Allen wrench, just tightening up little Allen wrench heads to put it all together. We had a Mark McGwire jersey on display because it was Memphis and the Cardinals were an affiliate of the Redbirds at the time. So Babe Ruth, you can see the large life-size cutout. He presented lots of photo opportunities for people. Everybody who saw that life-size cutout of the Babe kind of wanted to go over and stand next to it and take a picture. Here is a friend of mine. There's another fun thing about the job. I'd just be driving across the country and I'd get out my phone book and start figuring, who do I know here? So here's an old pal of mine I used to know out in Arizona, and now he lived outside of Des Moines, Iowa. And this picture to me has a real field of dreams feel to it. That's his own soybean farm behind him. My friend Troy was a soybean farmer, and we set him up there. And then that night, I ended up just staying at his house. I had a little stipend for hotel rooms every night, but if I was traveling, I could stick that 75 bucks, that's what it was. I was allowed 75 bucks a night for a hotel. But if I wanted to save that, I could stick it in my pocket and stay at somebody else's house and use that other 75. It was prorated, so I spent my time at a combination of the best and worst hotels in the country. I would stockpile the money sometimes and stay at a roadside place, and then sometimes I'd stay like at the Peabody in Memphis. So here we are in Des Moines, and like I said, photo opportunities just abound, and I like to take a lot of black and white pictures when I was traveling because of the fact that the Babe was in black and white. And this is a woman who worked for the Des Moines, Iowa team, and they were having a photo shoot where they all put uniforms on for the players that day, and I just happened to get a shot of her. I had another group shot that I didn't include, but this is the kind of thing that was happening in our travels all the time. Here I'm visiting again with an old friend. The tall guy next to the Babe there was my old college roommate and my best friend in life still to this day, my friend Jason Yoder. We were in Dayton, Ohio, and his mom was moving from one house to another. And I happened to be passing through town while this was happening. These kind of crazy coincidences and occurrences kept happening. And I said, hey, you need a hand with the move? And she said, yeah, I really could. And I said, well, let me get this exhibit off the truck. I got this U-Haul with me. And we just threw the exhibit in the garage, and we moved her furniture, got her all set up in a new place, put the exhibit back on, and I was out on the road again. So you get to a real slice of the country and Americana and the different things that you don't know about when you live in one part of the country and you're moving through different parts. This is a barbecue stand called the Sweetwater Barbecue, and it was in a town called Waynesboro, Missouri. And somehow in my travels, I saw that it was listed somewhere, and I said, maybe I'll get a sandwich at this place as I was going from one place to the next. And I pulled over and I had one of the greatest barbecue sandwiches I ever had in my life. And I just thought to myself, well, I hope during the course of the year, I might be on this highway again sometime, and I'll remember to get another sandwich here, which I, fortunately enough, was able to do, and I stocked up on some of their barbecue sauces, and it was just those kind of happenstance occurrences that also made this job so much fun. There's the Babe. This is again at a friend's house. We're in Oklahoma City, and my friend Jane was happy to see me. They got a great ballpark in Oklahoma City with a big statue of Mickey Mantle in front of it. And trying to remember who the affiliate was, one of the Texas teams. I think it was either Rangers, I think. But so again, saved a little hotel money, stayed at my friend's house, and then she said, let's stick the Babe in the door, and that's me waving over his shoulder there. There was these kind of another day where I got to save a little hotel money. In Oklahoma City, this is the site of the Oklahoma City bombing. So again, everywhere you went in the country, there was something specific, unique to the place that kind of made it what it is and made it different than other places. When I got to Oklahoma City and my friend Jane met me, I remember it was late at night. It was probably around 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and I was going to go to her house to sleep, but she said, there's something you got to see first before we go anywhere else. And it was a very somber moment. I didn't know where she was taking me, but this memorial really kind of defined that area in the city where it was, and it was very, it just gave you a pause for a moment to think about things and what was going on in the world. That was back in 1994, I believe, the bombing, but it felt fresh even in 2001, just 7 years later. It seemed like they were very cognizant of it, and still, I remember when I parked the U-Haul out in front of the ballpark, and if you remember, it was a Ryder box van that the guy parked out there, the bomb was in, and I was getting ready to pack the exhibit up on the last day, and I was trying to get a little jump in front of the traffic, and I pulled this thing up out by the gate, by the ballpark, and there was a great cause for concern. Everybody came running over, and I didn't realize what that meant in their memories. And one of the security guards told me, I said, I'm just loading up the exhibit, but there was a little lesson for me in that. If you could move on to the next one.
Sure.
I went the wrong way. Yeah.
You can do it, Bruce.
Here. Oh, there we go. There's the statue of the Mint out in front of Oklahoma City. They have a nice canal system there too. I don't know if you've been to Oklahoma City. I was a little surprised to see that right around the ballpark. They called this the Brick Yard, and the neighborhood was called Bricktown in Oklahoma City. And there was nice places to eat and drink along the canals. Anybody recognize this guy?
Babe Ruth.
No, the other one. So this guy is kind of a nemesis for Orioles fans. That's Ron Swoboda. And you remember what Ron Swoboda is most well known for? Well, I was down in New Orleans at the New Orleans Zephyrs ballpark, and Swoboda was the broadcaster for the team. And he's a real interesting guy, and kind of what I would call a Renaissance man. He was a writer, he was an entertainer, he did some TV news broadcasting, and at this point in his life, he was working up in the booth. When I worked this job, oftentimes on my first night in town, I'd go up in the booth with the broadcast teams to tell the fans out there about the exhibit being at the ballpark for the next 4 days. And we'd get into some fun conversations about the Babe. And I remember Swoboda, he said, Charlie, me and the Babe have a lot in common. And I said, oh, really? He goes, yeah, well, we're both from Baltimore. And we both played right field, and then he stopped.
I've always wondered how famous he would be if he'd missed that ball.
I don't think he would have been near as famous.
I mean,
Just his claim to fame. And he was a nice enough player. He platooned with Art Shamsky that year. They were a good right field platoon. But so here is on the field with one of the Zephyrs players. Now, we would do this with the bat, okay? We would pull, this is the bat that the Babe actually used. This is a game-used Babe Ruth bat, and I want to say it was from the 1927 season. And in 2001, we were free to let people handle the bat. The following year, they decided they thought we should have them handle the bat with gloves. I used to talk with Greg Schwallenberg, who was the curator at the time, about that. Do people need to hold the bat with gloves, or can they just hold it? And there were two schools of thought, and he thought that it was nice that the people actually got to feel it, and whatever, hand oil managed to get its way on the bat just kind of became part of the bat's patina, It was just, he thought of it almost like a living organism, and it had a crazy effect on people. When people held the Babe's bat, first of all, it's heavy. It's also thick in the handle. It's not a modern bat. Hope that's good luck. It's not bad. Okay. Yeah. So, but you can see the look on this guy's face, and he's just, glowing. And the guy behind him is all lit up, and the bat itself is glowing in some kind of light up there. And I've interpreted some of these photographs that were taken at the time to be, to me, the presence of the Babe himself. I thought there was some kind of spiritual presence going on here. I thought when we whipped the bat out and let people hold it, sometimes magic happened. And this was one of those moments. He looks like Lancelot pulling the sword out of the stone in that picture.
Isn't it heavy?
It's very heavy. Yeah. They all remark, when the players hold that bat, the first thing they say is, how did he get around with that thing? How did he get that thing moving? And if you remember, the Babe used to take a few steps when he'd kind of do a little stutter step to get that thing moving. Here's a guy who ended up playing for the Orioles later on. He was with the Mets affiliate at the time. It was New Orleans Zephyrs, but his name's Travis Driscoll. I don't know if you remember this guy. He had a good little stint with the Orioles, but he was another guy who took it upon himself to wander up to the concourse. The Denver ballpark New Orleans ballpark had a sunken seating bowl, and he was doing some laps on the stairs or something, and he saw what was going on, and he asked to come over, and he asked to see what was happening, and he's kind of mimicking the Babe's pose there with the bat holding it the way he was. I was doing this slideshow last night, and my girlfriend was checking my slides, and she's like, "Oh, like it's just men." So men. Inevitably, I'd get a flat tire every now and then. Just be driving around the country, boom, a blowout. So this one's in Norfolk. I was very appreciative of my AAA membership. That's the first thing you do when you get a flat is call AAA, and then you know you're going to be waiting for about an hour. So, this was right on the exit in Norfolk, Virginia. And luckily that day there wasn't too many people on the road at the time that this happened. You can see how isolated it appears. But hopefully I had some sandwiches or something to drink with me because it was a little boring waiting for AAA to come. That was my first real experience. I hadn't been much of a cell phone user until I had this job. I didn't really have a need for one prior to that. And I had the little flip phone, cell phone of the time back then, and I didn't want to run out of juice talking to somebody, so I just make the call and fold it up and sit there. Altoona. Why Altoona? It says up there. This is at the Railroaders Museum in Altoona. You familiar with the Altoona Curve? I love that ballpark. And the whole history of the town and its railroad maintenance, that was where they come around, that the trains always had to get worked on when they were coming around that curve. That horseshoe curve was a site of a potential bombing during World War II. I don't know who knows that story, but a couple of German spies were captured in Altoona, and they may have even been executed there, but they were going to blow up the Altoona Curve, that bit of train track that circumnavigates the Alleghenies. And luckily I was able to visit the museum while I was in town. Babe's in the picture because he made an appearance there at some time. Babe was everywhere. Babe stopped everywhere. So here is the Altoona Curve ballpark, and that's a roller coaster in the background. How fun is that? And they have this crazy mascot named Steamer, and he's green, and he's supposed to be, I guess, a steam engine, but he looks a little like the Philly Fanatic, and he rides on that roller coaster sometimes during the game, and you see him in the front car. I think he might be in the next photograph, I'm not sure. Oh, that's the curve itself. So that's the train. I went up to see the Altoona Curve and took some shots up there at the Horseshoe Curve. There's Steamer. He was really one of the funniest mascots. Some of these guys are really great entertainers. And I remember I was in Altoona the following season on the last day of the year, and they had this effigy of the opposing team that Steamer was kind of beating the crap out of on top of the dugout, and he was taking it kind of far. And I remember the PA announcer was trying to tell Steamer to calm down, but I think it was Steamer's last day on the job ever. and he was not going to go out quietly, I guess.
He was steamed.
This is right down the road in Bethesda, Shirley Povich Field. That's a guy who once covered Babe Ruth. So we, stood the Babe up there next to him. A little historic significance. That's a neat little post-collegiate league and field they have there. Bruce Adams, who runs the place, is a real good guy, and it was a fun place to set up.
By the way, a lot of us played there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people who played in Ponce de Leon League that's one of our regulars.
It's a great little ballpark.
It is.
Yeah.
That's where Georgetown plays their home games.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that too.
Yeah, you still.
And you see who was there that day? Tim Kirchen, right there, with his father and his kids. And they were funny. They were like beside themselves at the exhibit. They were just having a ball, posing for these pictures. I saw some kind of retrospective about him on ESPN a few years ago, and this photograph was in it. And I took the picture. And I said, how did he get a copy? I don't know where I posted it or published it somewhere, but I thought, isn't that funny that he used it himself in something he was doing? It might have had something to do with his father. They look like each other.
Just so you know, Tim's a member of our chapter.
Yes.
And his father used to be a member of the Bob Davis chapter. He was
Yeah.
one of the very first members ever of SABR.
They had a sense of history that day, that's for sure. Here's again, just a slice of minor league Americana. This is in Kinston, North Carolina, a place called Granger Field, which was built in 1947. And they just don't make them like this anymore. I'm looking at it now. and this is in hindsight and with the benefit of hindsight, it makes me think of the TV show Brockmire, if anybody's seen Brockmire. Seemed like a place that Brockmire might wind up. I remember when the fans were coming in, this place was so intimate that the PA announcer knew everybody. And as the fans were coming in, he would greet them by their name as they were walking along the concourse.
This is the hat from Kinston.
Oh, there you go, Kinston Indians hat, yeah. So it was 70s night. There's always these theme nights at the ballpark, and you see Austin Powers with Babe Ruth, and you can click on through. There's an old Negro leaguer, I think the guy's name was Sherwood Brown. He was being recognized at the ballpark that day. The usher dressed in her 70s garb. I really loved Kinston. There was nothing to do there, but the ballpark was a lot of fun. I remember looking for things to do at night, and there was just nothing. but everybody came to the park. Now we're in Durham, and that's the Lucky Strike Tower behind the Babe in Durham, at the newer of the ballparks in Durham. And they love to smoke in Durham. All these girls have cigarettes in their hands, and they're blowing smoke in the Babe's face and having a little party. I guess we were set up in the smoking section, if there is such a thing anymore. It was 2001. And then fireworks are such a regular occurrence in these ballparks. Either on Friday night or Saturday night, there was always fireworks after the game. And it's a little bit fun, but when you're doing it every week, it got a little tedious, and it always meant you had to stay at the ballpark a little longer at night until everybody was gone, because we had to tear down aspects of the exhibit to put back in the truck, the memorabilia and such. But a lot of fireworks nights. There's the Babe's head on fire with the big Durham bull behind him. Anybody recognize what this might be? Bull Durham, the movie. You remember the final scene when Andy Savoy and the Kevin Costner character, Crash Davis, were swinging on that swing on the deck right there. The swing's right there still, and that is the house that was used. So we did a little research when we got to town. So let's hit the Bull Durham sites while we're here, and obviously put the Babe out in front of these people's house. Her opening soliloquy in the movie, which he says, "The only church for me is the church of baseball." Those words were ringing in my ears when I was driving around town, and I set him up in front of a bunch of different churches. Here he is in front of the mosque. Baseball's still the only religion for me, too. This is the real-life Crash Davis. This is the guy that the character was based on, and he lived in town. I had a guy a museum volunteer who worked for the museum named Joe Short. He was a State Farm agent, and he would show up voluntarily in some of the towns that I was in, not getting paid, just show up. And when he got to town, he'd call other State Farm agents, and he would say, "Hey, who lives around here? You got any old ball players as clients? You have their phone numbers?" And people would offer up information. And we would meet people at their houses. And I remember we went to see Crash Davis at his house. He's holding the Babe's bat, and he's very excited about this. He was very gracious about meeting two relative strangers that just showed up at his door. He was in his 90s. He was in the process of dying. He had cancer. And you can see he's got some bed sores on him, and he's getting old, and this was a big slugger in his day, And I remember we sat with him for an hour or so, and when it was time to leave, he was at the door, and he said, "You guys can stop by any time. You're ever in town, feel free, just knock on the door." And I remember thinking, I didn't think he had much time left to live, and I thought it was a very nice gesture of him to say that, but I didn't think I'd ever see him again. And I did not ever see him again, but Joe Short attended his funeral a couple of months after this.
Wow.
Richmond, Virginia. You familiar with that ballpark? It used to be the Richmond Braves. I don't know if that big Brave is still there, but it's a tremendous statue. It was kind of, readily recognizable from the side of the road, even out on the highway. You'd look up and see this guy peering out at you. And I thought we had interesting placement for the exhibit right behind there. That's Kansas. So when you drive across Kansas, it's about what it looks like for 400 miles. This is Colorado, And again, you'll notice that I had a blowout, and this is outside of, I want to say Glenmont Springs. And I got a blowout, and then a couple hours later, I got another blowout. And when the AAA guy came, I said, these tires are new. Why did I get 2 blowouts in the same day up here? He says, you gotta let air out of the tires when you get up in these elevations. You're gonna go poof. So I blew 2 tires in the same day. This place, that one, had a great Mexican restaurant where I had some really good chilaquiles, luckily. This is Utah. And there were so many, when out west, there's all these scenic road stops, these places where you just pull the truck over and you're driving down the road and you say, hey, I gotta stop and get a shot here, I gotta get a picture. And I would just grab strangers who were around. Some truck driver took this one for me. I said, can you get me and all that in the back truck? He said, yeah. He goes, get it from me too. He gave me his camera and we stopped and did some photographs. You can click to the next one. There's going the other way, back across Kansas again. This is Rosenblatt Stadium, the site of the College World Series. So we got to see some really fun places. They don't play there anymore, whatever the Omaha team is. I think, or did they get a new venue for the College World Series? Even I'm not sure if this ballpark is still in use, but it had some great history, and it was a little retro. It wasn't brand new. I don't know exactly what had been done to it over the years, but it had a kind of midway feel to it, half old-timey and half modern.
The Creighton University Blue Jays.
That's who plays there now? Yeah. Here, I made a stop in Genoa, Ohio at my good friend Billy Werner's parents' house. That's Dolores having a beer with the babe in the back. So my friend's family has a little happy hour party at their house every Thursday. Now this is 22 years ago. Neither one of those people are alive anymore, my buddy's parents, but everybody in town came over to see the babe that night. It was a pretty good spread, as you can see. Lots of food and beer. Then we took them out to the bars. This is some local bar in Genoa, Ohio. Okay, now we're into the next season. In 2002, we started the season out in Arizona in spring training, and this is the Maryvale ballpark where the Milwaukee Brewers play, and of course the famous sausages, and also the famous baseball artist Gary Sierikowski, who worked with me that year. We traveled together. That's me and Gary posing for pictures with the sausage. Richie Sexton, do you remember him? So this was an ESPN moment, and that's Mark Schwartz. He's a Baltimore guy too. The broadcaster for ESPN was doing a segment on one of those spring training segments, and then again you have that magical moment where the player gets to feel the babe's bat, and that made it onto the ESPN broadcast that night, which was kind of fun. And Sexton was a pretty big slugger. I saw him hit some really big home runs in his day.
Is that Joe Orsolak at the camera there?
That might be. You can see how well received this exhibit was. This is in Mesa, a Cubs game at Hohokam Stadium. And once the gates opened and people came in, we would get mobbed. We would literally get mobbed with fans circling around the place. I can see Gary observing from the back. He's got a Eli Giants jersey on in the back right there. He's standing by that circle. But just a magical day in Mesa. And more of, the girls like to pose with the babe, and these were some liquor promo girls setting up a booth somewhere on the concourse, and Ronnie Wu, the great, you can back to Ronnie Wu again. Or you can stay there. So, Ronnie Wu, the guy who goes woo, 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 woo in Chicago, he comes all the way out to Mesa in spring training to make those noises. And he's pointing at his little cubby bear, so. This was at Scottsdale Stadium where the Giants have spring training. And this guy's walking by and he had this shirt on and it's Willie Mays eating a baseball with chopsticks. And I said, what a crazy shirt that is. I wonder what that means. And I ended up standing next to him in the bathroom an inning or two later and I said, hey, what's going on with that shirt you got there? He said, well, I played for a softball team in San Francisco and we're called the Willies. And we have a graphic artist on the team who makes a new jersey for us every year. And this is last year's jersey. And then he asked me if I had a business card. And I gave him my business card, and months later, when I came back home off the road, he sent me that jersey in an envelope. Literally gave me the shirt off his back. This is a broadcaster from a Japanese television network. They were doing something about Barry Bonds, but she stopped by to pose with the babe. Here we are at Gene Autry. That's Gene Autry in the middle there. He used to be the owner of the Angels, of course. Now it's Artie Moreno, but this was a bust that they have of Gene Autry at the ballpark in Tempe. And it's no longer there because of the change in ownership. But we had just finished a month of spring training games in Arizona, Gary and I, and we were really feeling good about the whole thing. It was such an enriching experience. It was so much fun to be out there in the spring. And we were just about ready to get back on the road and drive all the way across the country. We stopped to pose for this picture with Babe Ruth and Gene Autry. I have another one that I thought I had included here, but I don't, where there were orbs over their faces. And I thought, oh, look at that, the ghosts of Gene Autry and Babe Ruth came out on the last day. Stopped by Monument Valley on the way home. That dust in Monument Valley, it's like silt, you know, that sand. It gets in your hair and in your teeth and everywhere. And it was on the dashboard of the truck. It seemed like for another 6 months. I couldn't get that Monument Valley out of the truck. Here we are, Niagara Falls. He went everywhere. He went everywhere for 2 years. We left him out there for a second, standing in front of the falls, and we'd let people see. If you want to click to the next one, we just kind of observe what will people do if they see the babe standing there, and everybody was just stopping and posing for pictures like these guys. And the babe slept here, of course. They slept everywhere. This was another friend's house, and my friend's family, a guy in Jamestown, New York, they're Red Sox fans up there in that part of New York. And one of the kids was away at college, my buddy's brother, so we thought we'd show him what happened in his room while he was away. And they dressed he said, guess who slept in your bed while you were out of town?
This was when the curse of the babe was still in effect.
Yes, that was when the curse of the babe was still in effect. And there was great timing with that comment, because this photograph is in Sudbury, Massachusetts. Somebody knows the Sudbury, Massachusetts story, I'm sure. So this was one of the houses. The babe had 2 houses in Sudbury that he lived in the off-season with his first wife, Helen. And I like this pile of wood that you see on the side of the house, because it makes me think that's some kind of off-season activity. You might see the babe chopping wood. I said, man, I wonder if he chopped those himself, but that would have been 100 years ago. But still, we took him back to the house. Somehow we found the house. There were these people. They had an organization called the Restoration Project. And they redid furniture, but they were also part of a charitable organization that helped people get back on track who had trouble in their lives. And they were the ones who heard the story of the piano. You know the story of the piano? So the other house, the babe had 2 houses. Click to the next slide. This is the other house. He had one out by the pond, Willis Pond. It's really a lake, but they call it a pond. And so one night, they're having a party, and there's too many people to fit in the little house. They say, well, let's move the piano outside. They move it outside, and it slides down a hill and falls in the lake. And people in Sudbury, Mass. thought if we could just rescue the piano from the lake, maybe that would heal the curse of the Bambino. So they heard this was a news story that was actually happening in 2002 at this time. And I don't remember if they ever did pull the guts of the piano out or ever found it. They had divers going down and metal detectors and whatnot. But
Never found
it
it.
was never found. But this was actively happening while we were driving through town. Made it to Gates of Heaven Cemetery in Mount Vernon, New York, where the babe is buried, not far from Billy Martin, right around the corner. The minor league mascots, anybody familiar with Myron Noodleman? This guy, he's a legend. So sometimes our paths would cross with the other baseball carnies. That's what I would call it. It was like a carny culture. You pack up the tents and go to the next town, and sometimes you're staying in the same hotel with Myron Noodleman. And here's my mail, catching up with the mail. That's back in Omaha, but I was on the road for so long, sometimes they would gather my mail and send it to the next place I was going. So at least I don't know how many weeks worth or it's showing up, and you can see it's coming from the Babe Ruth Museum in the envelope. somebody was sending me my mail. This is a young guy. This was in Omaha. His name is Rod Bear. He's a minor leaguer who I don't think he ever made it to the majors, but I heard his name over the PA. And I said, that sounds familiar. When I was in college, I covered high school football in Scottsdale, Arizona. And there was a standout running back on my old high school alumni, Coronado High School, named Rod Bear. And I said, when I heard his name, I said, I wonder if that's that same guy. And I went down to the field and yelled into the dugouts, hey, somebody get Bear. And they brought him out. I said, hey, you the same Rod Bear that used to be a running back in Scottsdale? He goes, yeah. I said, your parents probably have a little scrapbook with some stories I used to write about you in it. And I said, I used to cover you when you were a kid. And he said, man, that's great. He said, if you ever hear my name over a loudspeaker in any ballpark, always come down and say hello. So, here's a Babe Ruth impersonator in Grand Rapids, Michigan, what they call the West Michigan Whitecaps. That's a pretty neat ballpark too, way out there. I don't know if anybody's had the pleasure to be there, but it's kind of a neat place. Here, Rickwood Field, Birmingham, Alabama. One of the perhaps two oldest ballparks in the whole country. There's another ballpark in Bisbee, Arizona called the Warren Ballpark, and they fight back and forth about which one of them's older. Look at the layers of paint and the moss growing on the concrete. This place is a museum or even a mausoleum. I mean, it was just an incredibly, it was such a privilege to be able to walk through this place. And I don't know if it would just happen to be open. I remember when we went in, there was nobody there, and we were just wandering around taking pictures. Nolan Ryan. Yeah, there he is again. And this is in Austin, Round Rock, Texas, which he was the owner of the team. I believe he might still own that franchise, but he was part of our sponsorship deal with the Baby Ruth candy bar. You see, he's wearing a Baby Ruth jersey. During that summer, people would fill out little raffle tickets for the opportunity to bat against Nolan Ryan. And the winners, whose names were drawn, got to go to a game in Round Rock in Austin and face Nolan Ryan, just like Joe Orsolak. And most of them got the same result. They just came up and struck out and got to smell one of his fastballs going by. This guy was an usher in the ballpark in Round Rock, and his name is Mickey Rudiman. There's something special about Mickey Rudiman. One is he was the subject matter for a novel by Elliot Asimov, who did the 8 Men Out, called Man on Spikes. And it was basically about prejudice and discrimination in baseball revolving around the fact that he was one of the early Jewish major league players. And he faced a lot of hostility for that. He also is the next name in the baseball encyclopedia after Babe Ruth. He made it for just a cup of coffee, and I used to carry the Big Mac around with me in my travels, if you can believe it. Like, I can't leave town without my Macmillan encyclopedia. So I got him to sign his page in the baseball encyclopedia that night. This is the end, I guess. We've come to the end. This is way back 22 years ago when I first came off the road with the exhibit. We had some photo shows with the pictures displayed in this form instead of the way we just did it now. But this is the conclusion of the presentation.